James M. Norris, an 87-year-old who had woven a tapestry of routine and purpose around his job at the local supermarket, suddenly faced the stark, cold reality of dismissal. For 34 years, the aisles and the checkout counters were his domains, where he found not just a livelihood but also a refuge from the relentless grief of losing his only child years ago. It was here, amidst the mundane tasks of packing groceries and stacking shelves, that James found a semblance of peace, his work helping to sustain not just him but also his wife Evelyn, who required constant care due to her declining health. On what seemed like just another Thursday, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the employee break room, the new manager, Lawrence T. Owens, a man with a sharp suit and even sharper business ideologies, called James into a sudden, impromptu meeting. Lawrence, whose arrival at the supermarket was marked by promises of efficiency and restructuring, carried an aura of corporate zeal that often clashed with the more familial atmosphere of the workplace. "James, as you know, we're in the process of making some significant changes around here," Lawrence began, his voice carrying a rehearsed empathy that didn't quite reach his eyes. "The company is moving in a new direction, and we're having to make some tough decisions regarding our staffing." James, his hands slightly trembling, not from age but from a brewing storm of emotions, nodded slowly, bracing himself for what was to come. His heart, heavy with a mix of anticipation and dread, seemed to beat louder with each passing second. "I'm sorry to say that we need to let you go. It's nothing personal, James. Purely business. You've been a great asset to us, but your position is no longer viable in our new model," Lawrence explained, his words slicing through the thick, tense air. The word viable echoed mockingly in James's ears. After nearly 3.5 decades, to be reduced to a term so sterile and dismissive was an affront not just to his dedication, but to his very essence. The supermarket was more than a job. It was a lifeline, a place that had given him structure and purpose, especially in the face of personal tragedies that could have otherwise consumed him. "But I've given everything to this place," James found himself saying, his voice a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "Isn't there any other role I could take? Surely, there's something." Lawrence shook his head, his expression firm and unyielding. "I'm afraid not, James. The decision is final. We appreciate all you've done, and of course, we will provide a severance package that reflects your years of service. It's the least we can do." As James walked out of the break room, the supermarket aisles he had known so well seemed to blur into a cascade of colors and shapes, each step heavier than the last. His dismissal was not just the end of a job, but the crumbling of a world he had built with meticulous care, a world that sustained not only him but also Evelyn, whose needs were as much a part of his routine as the job itself. With each slow, measured step, the weight of uncertainty and injustice bore down on him, a stark reminder of the vulnerability that came with his age. The promises of restructuring felt hollow, a corporate euphemism that masked the dismissal of not just an employee, but a dedicated soul who had considered his work a calling. As he reached the exit, the sliding doors opening to a world that now seemed both familiar and strangely alien, James knew that this was not just an end. It was also a beginning, an unwelcome thrust into a new chapter of life, one that he was neither prepared for nor desired. Yet, within him, the faint embers of resilience began to stir, a quiet resolve to find purpose once again, even in the face of such profound loss. This resolve would soon lead him into new endeavors, where his dedication and spirit would find new grounds to flourish. With the abrupt end of his long-standing employment, James, aged 87, embarked on a quest to find new work, his resolve unshaken by the uncertainty that lay ahead. Each morning, he meticulously prepared, dressing in the same suit that had witnessed decades of his professional life, a subtle armor against the creeping doubts of his capability. With a polished resume in hand, a document chronicling over 3 decades of unwavering service and expertise, he stepped into the world, hopeful yet apprehensive. As James navigated the process of job applications, he was confronted with the stark, unforgiving reality of ageism. Each interview, while starting with polite introductions and nods to his extensive experience, invariably ended in rejection. The reasons varied: overqualified, underqualified for the modern demands of the job, or the most dishearteningly vague of all, not a good fit. Behind each cordial smile and handshake, James felt the unspoken judgment on his age, a silent dismissal of his ability to contribute. It was a harsh reminder of a world that increasingly valued youth over experience, novelty over wisdom. Despite the doors closing one after another, James's spirit remained undeterred. He continued to apply, to show up, to present himself with the dignity and professionalism that had defined his career. Yet the constant rejections began to weigh on him, each no a subtle echo of the dismissal he had already suffered. It seemed the workforce had no place for someone like him, an elder whose age seemed to overshadow his capabilities and potential. But it was not just the rejection from potential employers that stung. In his interactions, he often caught the sympathetic glances of younger employees, their eyes reflecting a mixture of pity and relief that they were not in his position. This sympathy, although well-intentioned, only served to deepen the feeling of alienation he experienced. It was as though he was an artifact from a bygone era, respected perhaps, but no longer relevant or useful. In this relentless cycle of applications and rejections, a lesser man might have succumbed to despair, but James found within himself a well of resilience that refused to be depleted. With each rejection, his resolve hardened, not out of stubbornness, but from a deep-seated belief in his own worth and abilities. He began to look beyond the traditional job market, to consider where else his dedication and experience might be valued. This introspection and the continued rejection steered him toward an unexpected path. Perhaps, he thought, there was a different way to contribute, a way to leverage his lifetime of skills and experiences in a context that was not bound by the corporate structures that seemed to have no place for him. It was during this period of reflection that James stumbled upon an opportunity that seemed to promise a new beginning, a local charity in need of volunteers to help the less fortunate. Intrigued and drawn by the prospect of making a meaningful difference, James saw a chance to redefine his purpose. As he approached the threshold of this new venture, his heart, albeit bruised by the rejections, felt a flicker of hope. Here was a chance to be useful again, to apply the tenacity and care that had defined his life in a sphere where the value of a person was not measured in years, but in the compassion and effort they brought to the table. Little did he know, this step towards volunteering at the charity would soon blossom into something far greater, marking the beginning of a significant new chapter in his life. After navigating through the storm of rejections, James found refuge and a renewed sense of purpose at a local charity dedicated to supporting homeless individuals. This new venture unfolded in the quiet backstreets of his community, where the charity, a modest but bustling hub, offered not just aid but hope to those it served. Here, amidst the daily challenges faced by the most vulnerable, James discovered a different kind of value in life, one not measured by profits or efficiency, but by compassion and impact. As James integrated into the charity, his initial role was unassuming. He started by organizing donations, sorting through boxes of clothes and food, arranging them methodically, ensuring that everything was accessible and in order. His meticulous nature and unwavering work ethic, honed over decades in the supermarket, made him a standout volunteer from the start. He treated each task with the same seriousness and dedication he had once reserved for his paid employment, driven by an inner conviction that this work, too, was vital. The environment at the charity was a stark contrast to the corporate world James had known. Here, interactions were driven by necessity and empathy rather than profit. He found himself learning about the lives of those he helped, listening to stories of hardship and resilience that widened his perspective and deepened his understanding of the world. This daily engagement was not only humbling, but also deeply fulfilling. It filled the void left by his career's end more completely than he could have anticipated. His presence became a familiar comfort to those who frequented the charity. With a gentle demeanor and an ever-ready smile, James became as much a part of the charity's fabric as the very walls that housed it. His reliability and passion for the work did not go unnoticed by the charity's management. They saw in him not just a volunteer, but a potential leader who could take on greater responsibilities. Within a few months, the charity faced an influx of needs and found itself in need of additional staff to manage the growing demands. Recognizing James's dedication and the trust he had built with both the team and the community, the management offered him a paid position. This role was not merely administrative, it was a chance for James to shape the programs and outreach efforts, to make a tangible difference in the lives of many. Accepting the position, James felt a resurgence of the sense of belonging and purpose he had lost with his dismissal from the supermarket. His new role brought with it challenges, of course, but also the autonomy to address them creatively and compassionately. He implemented new systems to streamline the distribution of donations, advocated for targeted outreach programs, and even initiated partnerships with local businesses to secure a steady stream of resources. As James threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, he hardly noticed the months slipping by. The charity's impact in the community grew visibly under his stewardship, and with each successful initiative, his conviction that he had found his calling deepened. He was no longer just a former supermarket employee. He was a vital part of a movement that brought real change to people's lives. The significance of his role at the charity and the personal fulfillment it brought him helped mitigate the pain of his wife Evelyn's deteriorating health. His days were long and demanding, yet he returned home each evening with stories of small victories and moments of human connection that lifted his spirits and, he hoped, brought some comfort to Evelyn as well. This chapter of his life, filled with new beginnings and meaningful work, was about to be tested by personal tragedy, signaling another shift in his journey as he would face one of his greatest challenges yet. As James immersed himself in the work at the charity, life at home took a grievous turn. His wife, Evelyn, who had been his companion through decades of both mundane and monumental moments, suddenly passed away from a heart attack. This loss tore through the fabric of James's existence, leaving him bereft and unmoored. Evelyn had been more than a spouse. She was a confidant, a source of constant support and love, especially in the years following their son's death. Her absence created a void that seemed to darken every corner of their home, which now felt too large, too quiet, too filled with echoes of a shared life that was no more. In the aftermath of Evelyn's passing, James found himself navigating a landscape of grief that was both profoundly personal and unsettlingly foreign. The routines they had built together, the simple pleasures of shared meals and evening conversations became painful reminders of his loss. Yet amidst this deep sorrow, James did not succumb to isolation or despair. Instead, he turned even more towards the charity, seeking refuge in the very act of giving that had defined his recent months. The charity became his sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself in the service of others. James threw himself into his work with a fervor that was both a tribute to Evelyn's memory and a lifeline for himself. He organized community drives with more zeal, managed outreach programs with heightened dedication, and met the needs of the homeless with a gentle, empathetic touch that belied his inner turmoil. Each act of service, each moment of connection with those he helped, became a step in his journey through grief, a way to mend the pieces of his broken heart. Through this period, James's understanding of loss and the resilience of the human spirit deepened. He saw his own pain reflected in the eyes of those he served, people who had lost everything, who had endured the worst life had to offer, and yet continued to press forward. This shared experience of loss created an unspoken bond, and in their stories of resilience, James found fragments of hope and healing. He realized that solace could be found not only in overcoming personal grief, but in alleviating the suffering of others. His work at the charity did not just help him heal, it transformed him. James became more than a volunteer or an employee. He was a pillar of the community, a beacon of hope for many who had none. The charity itself began to feel like a living memorial to Evelyn, each new program and success a testament to her enduring influence on his life. As the months turned to years, the acute pain of Evelyn's death began to fade into a dull ache, a somber background to his daily life. James's resilience in the face of personal tragedy inspired those around him, drawing more volunteers and benefactors to the charity's cause. With each passing day, his commitment to his work grew, intertwining his journey of healing with his professional endeavors. Yet as he continued to build this legacy of compassion and resilience, The shadows of his past dismissal and the unresolved feelings of injustice began to stir once more. It was during a chance meeting with former colleagues that James's attention once again turned to the supermarket where his career had abruptly ended. This encounter would soon ignite a quest for justice that brought old allies together and uncovered truths long buried. James, while finding a semblance of peace in his work at the charity, could not fully disentangle himself from the past injustice of his abrupt dismissal. The circumstances under which he was forced to leave the supermarket, his professional home for over 3 decades, lingered in his mind like a stubborn shadow. This unresolved chapter of his life demanded closure, not just for his own peace, but as a matter of principle. James believed that no one else should endure such unfair treatment, especially from someone who wielded power irresponsibly. Fueled by this conviction, James reached out to Shayna McDuffie and Matthew Cloutier, former colleagues who had also felt the brunt of the supermarket's new management style under Lawrence T. Owens. Shayna, who had been a cashier, and Matthew, who managed the stockroom, had their own grievances and suspicions about Lawrence's conduct. Both had observed troubling changes in the workplace atmosphere and policies, which seemed to disproportionately affect the older and more vulnerable staff members. Together, they began a meticulous process of gathering information. This involved revisiting their own experiences, talking discreetly with current employees who were still under Lawrence's management, and pulling records where they could legally obtain them. Their investigation revealed a pattern of questionable decisions and practices that extended beyond just James's dismissal. There were irregularities in how promotions were handled, discrepancies in pay that favored younger employees disproportionately, and a general culture of fear and silence that Lawrence seemed to cultivate to maintain his control. As they dug deeper, their informal inquiries led them to discover that Lawrence had a history of similar behavior at previous jobs. This pattern pointed to a systematic approach to management that relied on undermining established staff to bring in new faces who wouldn't question his methods. Shayna managed to contact a few of Lawrence's former colleagues from another retail chain, who provided stories that mirrored the experiences at James's supermarket. These accounts added substantial weight to their findings, painting a picture of a manager who repeatedly exploited his position for personal gain and at the cost of employee welfare. Equipped with this evidence, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew they were up against a formidable opponent, a man who had built his career on cunning and manipulation. But James also knew that the truth had a power of its own, one that could realign the scales of justice if presented convincingly to the right audience. The trio meticulously documented every piece of evidence, organizing it into a coherent narrative that they planned to present to the supermarket's corporate office. They hoped that by exposing Lawrence's unethical practices, they could not only secure his removal, but also initiate a change in how the supermarket treated its employees, ensuring a safer and more equitable workplace. As they prepared for this crucial confrontation, James couldn't help but feel that this was not just a personal vindication, but a fight for the dignity of all employees who had suffered silently. This sense of a larger cause fortified him as he, Shayna, and Matthew finalized their report, ready to challenge the status quo and demand accountability. Little did they know, their actions would soon ripple out further than they had imagined, setting the stage for dramatic changes within the supermarket chain. As James, Shayna, and Matthew delved deeper into the tangled web of Lawrence T. Owens's professional misdeeds, their investigation evolved from a mission of personal vindication to one of broader justice. The evidence they gathered painted a disturbing picture of systematic exploitation and mismanagement that had left deep scars on the lives of many employees over the years. Each document, each testimony they secured, added layers to their understanding of just how far-reaching Lawrence's unethical practices went. James found himself at the center of this investigation, driven by a fierce determination to expose the truth. His initial discomfort with the intricacies of such detective work soon gave way to a sharp acumen for identifying discrepancies and patterns. Under his guidance, the trio meticulously sorted through employment records, cross-referenced statements from past and present employees, and compiled reports that demonstrated clear trends of favoritism, intimidation, and unlawful termination. The more they discovered, the more their resolve hardened. Lawrence had not only dismissed older employees without just cause, but also manipulated performance reviews to justify his actions. He had engineered a workplace environment that rewarded subservience and penalized dissent, stifling any opposition to his authoritarian management style. This culture of fear ensured that few were willing to speak out, but those who did shared chilling accounts of coercion and retaliation. Armed with a growing dossier of evidence, James felt a surge of renewed vigor. It wasn't just about reclaiming his own position anymore. It was about rectifying a grievous wrong that had affected many. The trio knew that presenting their findings would be risky. They were challenging a figure who had significant influence within the company. Yet, the moral imperative to act was undeniable. They prepared a comprehensive presentation, complete with all their collected evidence, aiming to not only persuade the higher management of the supermarket chain of Lawrence's malfeasance, but also to spark systemic changes within the company. With each piece of evidence slotted into place, their case against Lawrence became irrefutable. They had emails, covertly recorded meetings, and financial records that all pointed to a pattern of behavior that violated numerous company policies and, potentially, the law. James, Shayna, and Matthew also reached out to a legal advisor to ensure that their presentation was watertight, framed in such a way that it left no room for doubt about the seriousness and accuracy of their accusations. As the day of the presentation approached, the weight of what they were about to do settled on James's shoulders with a profound gravity. He knew they were about to shake the foundation of the supermarket chain, potentially affecting the lives of thousands of employees. But alongside this weight came a clear sense of duty and a vision for a better, more just workplace. Their meticulous preparation culminated in a final meeting where they reviewed everything, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. They were ready to confront the corporate executives, ready to demand accountability and justice. This confrontation, they hoped, would not only lead to Lawrence's dismissal, but also mark the beginning of a new era for the supermarket, one where integrity and fairness defined the corporate culture. With everything in place, they prepared to step into the fray, unaware of the challenges that still lay ahead in their quest to upend a deeply entrenched system of mismanagement. After months of meticulous gathering and corroborating evidence, the day arrived when James, along with Shayna and Matthew, would confront the upper echelons of the supermarket chain's management. This meeting was the culmination of not just their hard work, but also their hopes for justice and systemic change within the company. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension as they entered the corporate headquarters, a sprawling complex that symbolized the power and reach of the supermarket chain. Each step through the polished hallways felt monumental to James, as if each footfall echoed louder than usual, marking the gravity of their mission. They carried with them not just physical documents and records, but also the weight of responsibility for all those who had suffered under Lawrence T. Owens's regime. In the boardroom, high above the city, the executives gathered, a collection of suited figures whose decisions impacted thousands of employees and their families. James and his team set up their presentation, each slide meticulously prepared to outline the depth and breadth of Lawrence's unethical practices. They presented documented cases of manipulated employee reviews, coerced terminations, and a culture of fear that stifled any dissent or complaint. As they laid out their case, the room's atmosphere shifted from polite interest to shocked disbelief. The evidence was not just compelling, but overwhelming, painting a clear picture of a management style that was not only unethical, but potentially illegal. The executives listened, their expressions turning grave as the reality of the situation dawned on them. The impact of the presentation was visible, shaking the very foundation of the company's understanding of its internal operations. The immediate response was a commitment to an internal investigation, a thorough review of all the claims presented by James and his team. The seriousness with which the upper management took the findings was a testament to the strength of the evidence laid before them. It was a moment of vindication for James, Shayna, and Matthew, who saw their months of effort begin to bear fruit. However, the promise of an investigation was just the beginning. As the meeting concluded, the executives assured James and his colleagues of swift action, but they also knew that the road ahead would be complex. Implementing change in such a large organization would require more than just identifying the problems. It would require a commitment to transformation, to altering the very culture that had allowed such practices to flourish. As they left the boardroom, the team felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. They had done what many had thought impossible, bringing the dark corners of Lawrence's management into the glaring light of scrutiny. But as they stepped out of the corporate headquarters, the reality set in that this confrontation was merely the opening salvo in what could be a protracted struggle for justice and reform. The weight of what was to come hung over them as they prepared for the next phase, ensuring that the investigation was not just thorough, but led to real, lasting change. Their journey had taken a crucial turn, but the path ahead remained fraught with challenges. The internal investigation into Lawrence's conduct was as thorough as it was revealing. Over several weeks, a special committee appointed by the supermarket chain delved deep into the allegations presented by James and his colleagues. They scrutinized every piece of evidence, conducted interviews with numerous employees, and reviewed years of management records. As the investigation progressed, the extent of Lawrence's mismanagement and unethical behavior became increasingly apparent, confirming the patterns James and his team had uncovered. This period was one of anxious waiting for James, who found himself caught between hope for justice and the familiar pang of doubt that had shadowed his initial dismissal. Each day brought with it a mix of anticipation and suspense, a waiting game that tested his patience and resolve. However, James continued his work at the charity, finding solace and purpose in aiding those less fortunate, which provided a grounding contrast to the corporate turmoil. Finally, the results of the investigation were made public. The committee found overwhelming evidence supporting the claims against Lawrence, leading to his immediate dismissal from the company. The news came as a profound relief to James, a confirmation that his long fight was justified. Lawrence's removal was a signal that the company was taking serious steps towards rectifying the wrongs of the past and moving towards a more ethical management approach. In the wake of this decision, the supermarket's upper management took further steps to ensure such abuses of power would not occur again. New policies were implemented, focusing on transparency, fairness in employee treatment, and rigorous checks on managerial power. The company began to hold regular forums where employees could voice concerns without fear of retribution, a move that cultivated a new atmosphere of openness and mutual respect. Amidst these sweeping changes, James was offered his old job back. The offer was extended with an apology for the circumstances of his dismissal and an acknowledgement of his years of loyal service. It was a tempting proposition, a chance to return to the familiar aisles and tasks that had once formed the core of his daily life. However, James's experiences had reshaped his outlook profoundly. The supermarket had been his career and his haven, but his role at the charity had grown into something deeply fulfilling, offering him not just a job but a calling. This offer of reinstatement was, for James, less about returning to his old job and more a symbol of his personal victory and redemption. It validated his decades of service and his recent battle for justice, serving as an acknowledgement that his contributions were valued and his grievances legitimate. The supermarket chain's willingness to rectify its mistakes was a testament to the power of standing up for one's beliefs and the impact of determined advocacy. As James pondered his next steps, the sense of vindication was sweet. Yet he knew his heart now lay elsewhere, in the work that had sustained him through his darkest times. His commitment to the charity had not wavered through the ordeal. Rather, it had strengthened. Thus, while he appreciated the gesture from the supermarket, he felt compelled to continue his advocacy and support for the homeless, driven by a renewed understanding of the importance of his work there. The resolution of his personal struggle marked a significant chapter in his life, closing with a sense of accomplishment and justice. But as he turned his full attention back to the charity, James was unaware of the broader impact his story would soon have, not only within the supermarket chain, but in the community at large, as news of his fight and victory began to inspire others. Following the vindication and the offer to reclaim his old position at the supermarket, James found himself at a significant crossroads. The struggle for justice had not only reinstated his honor, but had also deepened his commitment to the charitable work that had sustained him through his personal trials. Thus, despite the opportunity to return to a familiar routine, James chose to dedicate his energies full-time to the charity that had given him purpose in a time of need. His decision resonated deeply within the community, where his story had become a beacon of advocacy and resilience. Local newspapers picked up on James's tale, and soon his experience was featured in articles that highlighted not only his personal victory against unjust treatment, but also his selfless dedication to the homeless. The coverage brought his efforts into the public eye, drawing attention not just to him, but to the cause he served. As his story spread, it ignited a broader dialogue about the issues facing the homeless population in the city. James's unwavering commitment to the charity and his recent vindication served as powerful catalysts for this burgeoning movement. Community groups, inspired by his dedication, began to collaborate more actively with the charity. Schools, local businesses, and even small government agencies started to engage, driven by the narrative of change and justice that James's experience embodied. The surge of support transformed the charity's capabilities. Donations increased, allowing for the expansion of services such as meal programs, temporary shelters, and job training sessions tailored for the homeless. Volunteers came forward in greater numbers, drawn by the story of a man who had turned his personal misfortune into a crusade for broader societal benefit. Amidst this wave of community involvement, James worked tirelessly. He became a figurehead of the movement, involved in planning and executing new initiatives that aimed not only to provide immediate relief, but also to offer long-term solutions for homelessness. His approach was holistic. He believed in empowering the individuals he helped by providing them with the tools and opportunities to alter their circumstances sustainably. Under his guidance, the charity launched a series of workshops that partnered with local businesses to provide job skills training. James knew the value of dignity that work could bring, having felt its loss profoundly when he was dismissed. He also spearheaded efforts to establish a small health clinic within the charity, recognizing that many of the homeless struggled with medical issues that went untreated due to lack of access. As the charity's influence grew, so did its reach. What had started as a local initiative began to attract attention from larger national organizations interested in replicating James's model in other cities. His story was not just inspiring change locally, but was setting a blueprint for how communities could come together to address homelessness compassionately and effectively. While James was focused on expanding the charity's impact, his work and the community's response to his story were about to attract even greater attention. This attention would soon extend beyond the local newspapers and community talks, bringing his efforts to the spotlight of a larger stage, which promised to amplify his message and the work of the charity even further. As he prepared for this new chapter, James remained grounded in his mission, ready to leverage any platform to advocate for those he aimed to serve. Under the steadfast leadership of James, the charity that once operated on the fringes of visibility burgeoned into a formidable beacon for homeless advocacy and support. What had begun as a modest initiative under the shadow of a personal crisis for James had grown, fueled by the collective will of the community and the newfound spotlight on James's endeavors. The transformation was both rapid and profound, turning the small charity into a pivotal institution within the city. As word of James's story and the charity's impact spread, donations began to pour in from diverse quarters. Local businesses, philanthropic foundations, and even anonymous benefactors moved by James's dedication and the clear results of his work. These funds were judiciously channeled into expanding the charity's programs, enhancing its facilities, and employing additional staff to manage the growing demands and opportunities. The charity's headquarters, once a cramped office in a nondescript building, relocated to a larger, more central location. This new space was not just bigger, it was designed to be welcoming and functional, equipped with amenities that allowed for a broader range of services. A large, well-stocked kitchen became the heart of the building, where meals were prepared daily by volunteers and staff, providing not just sustenance, but also a warm, communal space for the homeless to gather and dine. Educational programs, too, expanded significantly. Computer labs and classrooms were established, offering courses in basic literacy, financial education, and computer skills, empowering the charity's clients with the knowledge necessary to navigate their lives beyond the streets. Job placement programs were formalized in partnership with local businesses, providing a pathway to employment for those ready to re-enter the workforce. James also focused on the health and well-being of the homeless, understanding that without addressing these fundamental needs, other efforts could only go so far. To this end, the charity set up regular health clinics in collaboration with local hospitals and medical schools, providing checkups, vaccinations, and mental health support. These clinics were a lifeline for many, addressing often neglected health concerns and providing a foundation upon which individuals could begin to rebuild their lives. The charity's growth also meant it could advocate more effectively for policy changes. With James at the helm, the organization began to engage with local government officials, pushing for changes in how the city dealt with homelessness. Through forums, workshops, and public speeches, James and his team worked tirelessly to shift public policy towards more compassionate and practical solutions to homelessness. All these expansions and the subsequent successes did not just transform the charity, they fundamentally altered the landscape of homeless support in the city. The organization became a model for other cities grappling with similar issues, and James frequently consulted with leaders from other regions, eager to replicate the success of his programs. As the charity thrived, so did James's reputation as a leader who had turned personal adversity into a powerful force for community good. His vision and leadership had not only expanded the mission of the charity, but had also inspired a movement that reached far beyond the city's limits. Yet, even as the charity grew and its impact deepened, new challenges loomed on the horizon. With increased visibility came greater scrutiny and new hurdles to overcome. As James prepared to navigate these complexities, he remained focused on the core mission that had guided him from the beginning, to serve and uplift the most vulnerable members of his community. As the charity solidified its role as a cornerstone of support within the community, James poured his energies and remaining years into ensuring its sustainability and continued impact. His commitment to the cause was unwavering, fueled by both personal conviction and the visible changes he had helped engender in the lives of countless individuals who had once stood on the fringes of society, overlooked and underserved. Under his guidance, the charity not only expanded its services, but also deepened its outreach, becoming a touchstone for discussions on homelessness both locally and nationally. James's vision was clear: to transform the public's understanding of homelessness from a temporary plight associated with individual failure to a complex social issue deserving of compassion and comprehensive solutions. He spent countless hours strategizing with his team to innovate and improve the charity's programs. Under his stewardship, the charity initiated a series of transitional housing projects, providing not just beds but stable environments for individuals and families to rebuild their lives. These projects were complemented by life skills workshops, which equipped the residents with practical knowledge and confidence to navigate their futures more securely. James's efforts extended beyond the operational to the ideological. He became a vocal advocate for policy change, leveraging the charity's success stories to lobby for more effective and humane policies toward the homeless. His articulate presentations and heartfelt appeals resonated with policymakers and the public alike, gradually helping to shift local policies toward preventive measures and support rather than punitive approaches. His work also reshaped public perception. Through community forums, media interviews, and public speaking engagements, James shared stories of hope and transformation that challenged prevailing stereotypes about the homeless. These stories highlighted the circumstances that could lead anyone to homelessness, such as medical emergencies, job losses, or housing crises, thereby fostering a deeper empathy and understanding within the community. James's profound impact was felt not just in the tangible expansions of the charity or the shifts in public policy, but in the very culture of the city itself. The community became more inclusive and attentive to the plight of the homeless. Schools began incorporating community service and awareness programs into their curricula, businesses adopted more inclusive hiring practices, and the city itself invested more heavily in social services. As his final years approached, James took deliberate steps to ensure the future of the charity. He focused on mentoring the next generation of leaders, imbuing them with his ethos of compassion and action. He saw in them the continuation of his life's work and felt a reassuring sense of continuity that eased the contemplation of his eventual retirement. James's legacy was not merely in the programs he had established or the policies he had influenced, but in the vibrant, compassionate community that had crystallized around the charity's mission. His final years were marked by a sense of fulfillment and gratitude, as he witnessed the once small charity stand as a testament to what can be achieved when compassion is combined with action. As he reflected on his journey, the community he had helped foster, and the lives he had touched, James understood that his life's work had created ripples that would continue to expand, touching lives he would never meet. As the seasons of his life advanced into their final phase, James faced the inevitable decline of his health with the same dignity and foresight that had characterized his leadership at the charity. Aware that his time was becoming more precious, he turned his thoughts towards cementing his legacy, ensuring that his life's work would continue to flourish even in his absence. James began by documenting his journey, not just in terms of what had been achieved, but also how those achievements had been realized through persistence, ethical integrity, and an unwavering kindness. This documentation was not merely a record, it was a blueprint for those who would follow in his footsteps. He detailed the strategies that had proven effective, the challenges that had tested the charity's resilience, and the principles that had guided their solutions. His writings were interspersed with personal reflections on the lessons he had learned, both from successes and setbacks. In parallel, James crafted a farewell message intended as his final communication to the charity and the broader community he had served so devotedly. This message was a deeply personal reflection of his life's philosophy, woven through with his beliefs in the power of kindness, the necessity of ethical conduct, and the importance of relentless perseverance in the face of adversity. He hoped that his words would resonate, inspiring current and future generations to carry the torch with the same passion and purpose that he had. James's reflections also touched on the transformative power of community involvement. He expressed his gratitude for every volunteer, donor, and community partner who had joined him in the mission to reshape how the city cared for its most vulnerable. His message underscored the idea that while his name had been at the forefront, the achievements were the fruits of a collective effort, a symphony of compassionate souls working in harmony. As he prepared this legacy document, James also engaged in discussions with the charity's leadership team, sharing his vision and hopes for the future. He emphasized the importance of adaptability and innovation, encouraging them to remain open to new ideas and approaches that could further the charity's mission in a rapidly changing world. His guidance was a mixture of practical advice and philosophical wisdom, aimed at equipping the charity not just to sustain its operations, but to expand its impact. During this period, James also took the time to connect personally with many individuals within the organization, from the newest volunteers to the seasoned executives. These conversations were rich with anecdotes and advice, but more importantly, they were an opportunity for James to express his appreciation for their dedication and to reinforce the values that had driven the charity's success. As he finalized his farewell message, James felt a profound sense of completion. He had done his utmost to ensure that his values and visions would endure, embedded in the fabric of the charity. With his message ready to be shared, he looked forward to the official celebration of his retirement, a moment that would mark both an ending and a beginning, as the charity prepared to continue its mission, fueled by the enduring legacy of its founding leader. The twilight years of James drew to a close as he lay on his deathbed, surrounded by the quiet hum of life's final moments. His body weakened, but his spirit undiminished. James faced his mortality with a serene acceptance, comforted by the knowledge that his life's work had sparked significant change and would continue to inspire others long after his departure. James had prepared extensively for this final chapter, ensuring that his last written words would serve as a guiding light for future generations. This final message, crafted with careful thought and deep reflection, encapsulated the essence of his life's philosophy and the core values he had always championed. It was more than a farewell. It was a clarion call to continue the fight for kindness, justice, and human dignity. The setting for the reading of his last words was not a somber one, but rather a gathering filled with respect and celebration of his life. The attendees were a diverse group, comprising family members, close friends, colleagues from the charity, and several figures from the community, including the new supermarket manager. This individual, who had taken over the reins in a time of much-needed ethical reform, was chosen by James to read the message, symbolizing the bridging of his past and the ongoing legacy of his values. As the new manager began to read, the room fell into a reverent silence. James's words resonated through the space, his voice present in the careful phrasing and resonant ideals he had recorded. He spoke of the necessity of hope and the power of collective effort, urging all to look beyond individual achievements to the broader impact of their actions on the community and the world. He reminded them that change is often slow, requiring patience and persistence, and encouraged them to meet discouragement with renewed determination. The impact of his words was profound, stirring deep emotions in everyone present. There were tears from some, nods of agreement from others, and a shared sense of responsibility that seemed to fill the room, binding the group in a silent pledge to honor his legacy by advancing the causes he had held dear. James's final message also included a personal thanks to those who had supported him throughout his journey, acknowledging that his accomplishments were not his alone, but the result of many hands and hearts. He expressed his hope that the charity would continue to be a place of innovation and compassion, adapting to meet the needs of those it served, while staying true to the foundational values of respect and empathy. As the reading concluded, the emotional weight of the moment was palpable. The new supermarket manager, deeply moved, reflected on the significance of being chosen to deliver such a powerful testament. It was clear to all that James's words would live on, not just in written form, but in the actions and decisions of those he had inspired. With the final message delivered, the gathering slowly began to transition from a reflection on James's life to considerations of the future and how each person could contribute to the continuation of his legacy. As discussions began to stir among the attendees, plans were proposed and collaborations suggested, showing that even in his passing, James continued to influence and motivate those around him, ensuring that his final message would indeed leave an indelible mark on the world. In the aftermath of James' passing, the ripples of his influence continued to spread far beyond the confines of the charity he had nurtured and the community he had helped transform. His legacy, rooted in the profound principles of kindness, justice, and unwavering dedication, lived on not only through the policies and practices he had helped to change, but deeply in the hearts and minds of those he had touched. Across the city, James's philosophies were being integrated into new community initiatives and programs. Schools, where he had once been a guest speaker, integrated his teachings into their curriculum, encouraging students to engage in community service and to understand the deeper social issues that James had devoted his life to addressing. Businesses that had once collaborated with his charity now adopted more inclusive and ethical practices, inspired by his commitment to social responsibility. At the charity, James's presence was felt in every corner. His portraits adorned the walls, accompanied by his quotes that continued to motivate and guide the staff and volunteers. The programs he had initiated grew in scope and efficacy, supported by the robust framework he had established and the ongoing influx of support from the community. The charity's annual report featured a section dedicated to James's vision, detailing how his strategies and foresight had led to significant milestones in homelessness alleviation. Moreover, his influence transcended local boundaries. Other cities began to look to the model that James had developed as a blueprint for their own efforts to tackle homelessness. His writings, particularly his last message, were circulated widely, becoming a part of the essential reading for nonprofit leadership training programs. Conferences on social justice and community service often cited his work, discussing his innovative approaches and his moral philosophy as exemplars of effective and compassionate leadership. But perhaps the most poignant aspect of his legacy was the personal impact he had on individuals. Those who had worked closely with him, like Shayna and Matthew, carried forward his torch, leading with integrity and advocating for fairness and compassion in all their dealings. Volunteers who had been inspired by James's dedication now took on leadership roles within the charity, each embodying his spirit and continuing his mission. Families and individuals who had once benefited from the charity's services came back to share their stories of how the support and care they received had helped them rebuild their lives. These testimonials, often emotional, underscored the lasting impact of James's work on their personal journeys. They spoke of him not just as a founder of a charity, but as a catalyst who had empowered them to change their own fates. As years turned into decades, the essence of what James had built remained a vibrant, living force. Annual gatherings and memorial events were held in his honor, where stories of his impact were shared, renewing the commitment of the community to continue his work. His life, a testament to the power of individual agency to effect collective change, continued to inspire all those who believed in the possibility of a better, kinder world. Thus, James's legacy was not confined to the tangible achievements he had left behind, but was magnified in each life he had touched, each person he had inspired, and each heart that carried forward his message of goodness and perseverance. His echo of goodness reverberated through generations, a timeless reminder of the impact one life dedicated to service can have on the world.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.